black waitress collapsed during rush hour. What the billionaire did stunned the entire restaurant. What if a single moment of kindness could transform not just one life, but an entire community? The lunch rush at Murphy's Diner was in full swing when everything changed. Tables packed with construction workers grabbing quick bites, office folks on tight schedules, and regulars who'd been coming for decades. The clatter of plates, the sizzle from the grill, and the constant hum of conversation filled the air like a familiar symphony. Janelle had been on her feet for 6 hours straight, weaving between tables with practiced grace despite the exhaustion creeping into her bones. At 34, she'd been working double shifts to keep her family afloat, her smile never wavering even when her legs screamed for rest. She didn't notice the well-dressed man in the corner booth watching her with growing concern, or how her hands had started to tremble as she balanced yet another tray. Sometimes the most ordinary moments hide the most extraordinary stories, and today would be one of those days that changes everything. Where are you watching from tonight? Janelle Martinez had the kind of warmth that made strangers feel like family. She remembered how Mr. Patterson liked his coffee, black with just a hint of sugar, and that Mrs. Wilson always ordered the apple pie because it reminded her of her late husband's favorite dessert. This wasn't just a job for Janelle, it was her second home, and these people were her extended family. But times had gotten harder since her husband's accident 6 months ago. Carlos couldn't work construction anymore with his injured back, and their insurance barely covered the medical bills. Their 8-year-old daughter Maya needed new school supplies, and the rent was due next week. So Janelle picked up extra shifts, working breakfast and lunch rushes back-to-back, pushing through the bone-deep fatigue that had become her constant companion. In the corner booth sat James Crawford, though nobody in the diner knew his name or that he was worth more than most small countries' entire budgets. He'd been coming to Murphy's for 3 weeks now, always ordering the same thing, a simple burger and fries, and always sitting in the same spot. His expensive suit looked out of place among the working-class crowd, but something about the diner's authentic atmosphere drew him back. Today, James couldn't help but notice how Janelle moved differently. Her usual quick step had slowed, and she paused occasionally to steady herself against tables. He watched her deliver a plate of scrambled eggs to an elderly gentleman, her hand shaking slightly as she set it down. The man looked up with concern and asked if she was feeling all right. Janelle just smiled that brilliant smile of hers and assured him she was fine. But James could see the slight sway in her posture. "Order up," called Mickey, the gruff but lovable cook who'd been manning the grill for 15 years. 3 plates sat steaming under the heat lamps, waiting for Janelle to deliver them to table 6. She approached with determination, lifting the heavy tray with both hands. James found himself leaning forward in his seat, an inexplicable worry growing in his chest. The lunch crowd was particularly demanding today. A group of businessmen complained loudly about their steaks being overcooked, even though they'd ordered them well done. A woman at table 3 kept changing her order, seemingly oblivious to how busy Janelle was. Through it all, Janelle maintained her composure, apologizing for delays that weren't her fault and going above and beyond to make sure everyone felt welcome. James had built his fortune by reading people, by understanding their motivations and recognizing potential before others saw it. What he saw in Janelle was something rare: genuine kindness under pressure, grace in the face of adversity, and a work ethic that reminded him of his own grandmother who'd cleaned houses to put food on the table. As Janelle approached his table to refill his coffee for the 3rd time, James noticed the pallor of her skin and the way she gripped the coffee pot a little too tightly. He wanted to say something, but how do you tell a stranger to sit down and rest when they're clearly fighting their own battles? He simply thanked her and watched as she moved to the next table, unaware that her world was about to shift in ways she never could have imagined. The afternoon rush brought its own chaos. A bus full of tourists had stopped for lunch, adding 20 more hungry customers to an already packed diner. Janelle moved between tables like a dancer in a crowded ballroom, but James could see she was running on pure willpower now. Her breathing had become shallow, and twice he'd seen her grip the back of a chair for support when she thought no one was looking. At table 12, a young mother struggled to keep her toddler calm while managing twin babies. The little boy had knocked over his juice cup, creating a sticky purple puddle that spread across the table and dripped onto the floor. The mother looked mortified, apologizing profusely while trying to clean up with inadequate napkins. Other customers were starting to stare, some with annoyance at the disruption. Janelle appeared at their table like an angel, her voice gentle and reassuring. "Don't you worry about that, honey. These things happen all the time." She quickly cleaned the mess while chatting with the little boy about his toy truck, instantly calming him down. Then she brought the mother a fresh orange juice for the child and refused any tip, saying, "I've got 2 kids myself. We moms have to look out for each other." James watched this interaction with growing admiration and concern. Here was a woman who was clearly struggling herself, yet she still found the energy to comfort a stressed mother. It reminded him of something his own mother used to say: "The measure of a person isn't what they do when life is easy, but how they treat others when they're drowning themselves." The kitchen bell rang again, and Mickey shouted, "Janelle, table 7's getting impatient." The large party had ordered complex meals with substitutions and special requests. As she lifted the heavy tray loaded with plates, James noticed her arms trembling. She took 3 steps toward table 7 when her knees buckled. The tray crashed to the floor with a sound like breaking thunder. Plates shattered, sending food and ceramic shards across the linoleum. But that wasn't what made everyone gasp. It was the sight of Janelle, crumpled beside the mess, her face ashen and her breathing rapid and shallow. The diner fell silent except for the sizzle of the grill and the sound of James's chair scraping against the floor as he stood up. Other customers stared in shock, some pulling out phones to record rather than help. A few regulars started to move toward her, but they seemed uncertain, frozen by the suddenness of it all. James reached Janelle first, kneeling beside her without caring about his expensive suit touching the dirty floor. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Just breathe slowly," he said, his voice calm and steady. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, evidence of countless sleepless nights and endless worry. "If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up." Mickey emerged from the kitchen, his face pale with worry. "Somebody call 911, he shouted, but Janelle weakly shook her head, trying to sit up. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice told a different story. "I just need a minute." But as she attempted to stand, her legs gave out again, and she found herself depending on the kindness of a stranger whose name she didn't even know, unaware that this moment would change both their lives forever. "Please, I can't afford an ambulance," Janelle whispered, panic creeping into her voice as someone in the crowd mentioned calling 911 again. Those 5 words hit James like a physical blow. Here was a woman who'd just collapsed from exhaustion, and her first concern wasn't her health, it was money. It was a reality he'd almost forgotten existed, despite growing up in poverty himself. James gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry about that right now. Let's just focus on getting you better." His voice carried an authority that somehow made her relax slightly. Around them, other diners had begun to whisper, some expressing genuine concern while others seemed more interested in the drama unfolding before them. Mickey rushed over with a glass of water and a damp towel. "Janelle, honey, you've been pushing yourself too hard. I should have said something earlier." His gruff exterior couldn't hide the fatherly concern in his voice. He'd watched this young woman work herself to the bone for months, always with a smile, never complaining. "I need this job, Mickey," Janelle said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Carlos can't work, and Maya needs." She trailed off, embarrassed to be discussing her private struggles in front of a dining room full of strangers. James noticed how she instinctively tried to shield her vulnerability, even in her weakest moment. A regular customer, an elderly man named Frank who came in every Tuesday for the meatloaf special, approached with surprising gentleness. "I'm a retired paramedic," he told James quietly. "Her pulse is rapid but steady. She's dehydrated and exhausted, but I think she'll be okay with some rest and fluids." Frank had seen plenty of people push themselves past their limits during his 40 years in emergency services. James helped Janelle to a nearby booth, supporting her weight as she struggled to walk steadily. As she settled into the seat, he noticed the worn spots on her uniform where she'd scrubbed out countless stains, the sensible shoes with soles worn thin from miles of walking, the wedding ring that had seen better days but still gleamed because she polished it every night. These details painted a picture of dignity maintained despite difficult circumstances. "I have 3 kids at home," a middle-aged woman at a nearby table said softly to her companion. "I know what it's like to work when you should be resting. That could be any of us." Her comment sparked quiet conversations throughout the diner as people began sharing their own stories of struggle and perseverance. James listened to these whispered conversations and felt something shift inside him. He'd spent years in boardrooms making decisions that affected thousands of employees, but he'd lost touch with the human faces behind those numbers. Janelle represented something he'd forgotten: the raw courage it takes to keep going when everything seems impossible. "When did you last eat?" James asked her gently. Janelle's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I had some crackers this morning," she admitted. She'd been giving her portions to Maya and Carlos, telling them she'd eaten during her breaks. It was a lie she'd perfected over the past few weeks. "Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments." As Frank checked her pulse again and Mickey brought over a bowl of soup from the kitchen, James made a decision that would surprise everyone in the room, including himself. Sometimes the most powerful transformations begin with the simplest acts of human kindness, and he was about to demonstrate just how true that could be. James stood up and walked to the center of the diner, his presence commanding attention without him having to raise his voice. The conversations died down as everyone turned to look at this well-dressed stranger who'd taken charge during the crisis. Janelle watched from the booth, confused but grateful for his help. "Excuse me, everyone," James began, his voice carrying clearly through the now quiet restaurant. "I don't usually make speeches in diners, but today feels like an exception." He gestured toward Janelle. "This woman just collapsed because she's been working herself to exhaustion to provide for her family. She was more worried about the cost of medical care than her own health. How many of us have been there?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The mother with the toddler nodded knowingly. Frank, the retired paramedic, crossed his arms but listened intently. Even Mickey had stopped cooking to hear what this stranger had to say. "I want to share something with you all," James continued, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out his business card. Not many people would recognize the name James Crawford, but the company logo was unmistakable. Crawford Industries, one of the largest corporations in the country. "I'm the CEO of Crawford Industries, and I came here today because sometimes you need to remember where real value comes from." The diner fell completely silent. Even the coffee maker seemed to stop gurgling. Janelle's eyes widened as she realized who had been sitting in corner booth, quietly observing her work for weeks. "I've watched Janelle for the past month," James said, his voice growing warmer. "I've seen her comfort crying children, help elderly customers, and treat everyone with dignity and respect, even when she was clearly struggling herself. That's not just good service, that's character." He turned to address Janelle directly, walking back to her booth. "You've been taking care of everyone else, but who's taking care of you?" Before she could answer, he continued, "I'd like to offer you a position in my company. We need people like you. People who understand what it means to serve others with genuine care." Janelle's hands flew to her mouth in disbelief. I don't understand. I'm just a waitress. I don't have a college degree, or—" "You have something more valuable than any degree," James interrupted gently. "You have heart, integrity, and the ability to see people as human beings rather than just customers. Those are qualities that can't be taught." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The position comes with full health insurance, covering your husband's medical needs, and a salary that will let you stop working double shifts." The entire diner erupted in applause. Mickey wiped his eyes with his apron. The mother with the toddler started crying. Frank nodded approvingly, while other customers smiled and cheered. Even the businessmen who'd complained about their steaks seemed moved by what they were witnessing. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. But James wasn't finished. He had one more surprise that would not only change Janelle's life, but transform Murphy's Diner into something the community had never expected. As the applause died down and Janelle struggled to find words through her tears of gratitude, James was about to announce something that would ensure this moment of kindness rippled far beyond just one family's struggle. "There's something else," James said as the applause quieted down. He looked around the diner at the faces of working people who understood struggle, who knew what it meant to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. "Murphy's Diner has shown me something I'd forgotten in all my years of business, that the most important investments we make are in people." He turned to Mickey, who stood behind the counter looking bewildered by the turn of events. "Mickey, I'd like to buy this diner from you, not to change it, but to expand it. We're going to open 5 more locations across the city, each one employing people like Janelle. People who need a chance and are willing to work for it." Mickey's jaw dropped. The customers looked around at each other in amazement. What had started as an ordinary Tuesday lunch had become something none of them would ever forget. "But that's not the best part," James continued, his eyes twinkling with the joy of giving. "Every employee will receive full health insurance, paid sick days, and a living wage. Because no one should have to choose between taking care of themselves and taking care of their family." Janelle sat in the booth, tears streaming down her face, unable to speak. 3 hours ago, she'd been worried about making rent. Now, not only did she have a new job, but her entire community was being lifted up with her. It felt like a dream, but the warm hands of the other diners patting her shoulders and offering congratulations made it beautifully real. Frank, the retired paramedic, spoke up from his table. "Young man, I've seen a lot of people in my time, but what you're doing here, this is something special." His voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades helping others. "This is how change really happens, one person caring about another." As the excitement in the diner began to settle into happy conversations and plans for the future, James sat across from Janelle in the booth. "You know," he said quietly, "my grandmother cleaned houses her whole life. She used to tell me that kindness is never wasted, even when you think no one notices. You reminded me of her today." Janelle finally found her voice. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "This morning I was praying for a miracle, and here you are." "You were the miracle," James replied with a smile. "You reminded me why I got into business in the first place, to make life better for people. Sometimes we all need to be reminded of what really matters." 6 months later, Murphy's Diner had become the heart of a small empire of kindness. Janelle was managing the new location downtown, Carlos had returned to work part-time doing maintenance for all the restaurants, and little Maya had started a savings account for college. But more importantly, dozens of families across the city had found not just jobs, but hope. The original Murphy's still looks exactly the same, except for a small plaque by the door that reads, "Kindness changes everything." Because sometimes, when someone falls down, the most powerful thing you can do is help them stand back up. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovering that compassion really can change the world, one act of kindness at a time.